whenua, aro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Āmine. E te atua hono a mātou pununga I tēnei rā ki te wairua tapu, ki te krorea, ki te ngākau tapatahi. Ke whakanui a koe I runga I te ngākau rīpene tā, me te whai atuno I a koe pupuri mai nā te manaakitanga mō mātou. A whitia mai te ake na hoki o mātou tinana me o mātou wairua, ke ata mōhio ai mātou, koe a ihoa, krorea ki tō ingoa tapu. Āmine. Kia ora tātou. Welcome back for this webinar of ours. It's really nice to see a lot of new faces. And we've been working hard to kind of get our kōrero out to the rois. We have recently finished our last kind of regional wānanga, with our last wānanga in Hawke's Bay and Napier. And we are in the planning phase of what Changemakers are going to be doing next. So please keep an eye out on the emails. On the Friday afternoon emails, that'll keep you informed with what we're doing next. Just as a reminder, if you have any pārtai as the webinar is going on, there's a chat function in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Please leave your pārtai in there, and we will give out a Q&A part of the kōrero a little bit later. But I'm going to give the rākau straight to Dean, and he is going to introduce himself. Tēnā koe, Dean.
Tēnā koe te iwi, ko te pani o mātāhua te mainga, ko o Ruarangi ta awa, ko te paipama ta waka, ko I mātau tōku tūranga waiwai, ko Jenny Meihoa Wahine, ko Libby Jane Rātou, ko Lia, ko Atawhai, ko te manahu aku tamariki, nō reira, ko Dean Clarkson tōku ingoa, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora te whānau. Yeah, I'm Dean, the founder of Wana, First Men's Refuge in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so yeah, I'm sure we'll get into that kōrero later, but thank you for having me on. I was going to try and cancel this one. I've been mawiwi earlier this week, and then, but I was just like, oh, no, I can't do it because everyone's going live. So yeah, no, anyway. It's awesome to be here with all you all, and yeah, kia ora to the familiar faces. Yeah, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, bro. Just give us a little history on who you are, some of the mahi that you've done pre-Wana, so that we have a little context for what Wana became. I know that personally I've heard you speak at our whare down here in Tūranganui at Tawawhi. And the hononga between you and that whare. Yeah, just give us a little bit of context on yourself, brother.
Kia te pai. So yeah, just a quick brief timeline, and it's I go deep pretty quick because it started really early in my journey. So born on the 2nd of March 1975, weighing in at 10 pounds 7. And it wasn't too long after that I was first introduced to violence in the home. Well, not actually in my home, but in our community that we were involved in. And so we're a motorsport family. We're also a sporting family. So in summer, we're always at Western Springs up here in Tāmaki Makaurau. And then also in the winter, we were at the sports clubs. And my father was the barman the chairman of the bar. Chairman of the club, but also the barman. And so in all those spaces is where I was first introduced to violence as a young boy. And also in our community that we were raised, back in the day where, being 51 now, it's we didn't have 6-foot fences up in Tāmaki. Now everything's just like this big jammed up walls everywhere we are. And but grew up in Avondale initially. And we were, used to play all these sort of games and stuff in the community. And as we do, hide and seek lasted all day because we used the whole neighborhood. But as a 5-year-old boy, I was first sexually abused by an older male in our community. That's when it all started for me. Again, I talk about it as my puku radar because my puku I've worked quite hard on my puku over the years. So my puku is very in tune with things that are not right, and And so even though I wouldn't have understood what sexual abuse was, I knew in my wairua that what was happening to me wasn't okay. We moved out south. We lived in Clendon in Manarewa, and got introduced to whānau in the community where we were going to school, and connected with a whānau. And wasn't long after that, I was sexually abused by an older wahine in the community she was a lot older than me, but that went on for 2 years. And as a man, always hearing, or a young boy, you always hear, oh, that's all that boys want. They just want, sex and all of that. Boys think with their, all the rest of it. And so, I didn't know what to do with it. I knew it wasn't right, but I knew that as I was coming into puberty and things like that, my body started reacting to stuff. And I remember talking to a really good friend of mine who came out of child sex trafficking world. She said to me, you never have to apologize for that. Your body is designed to do what it does, just like when it's cold, you shiver. And that really gave me a real sense of, I guess it wasn't peace, but it was just the sense of going, okay, I wasn't being encouraging it, or all the rest of it. So I just again shoved it down as we did, and just carried on. And life happened after that, and just became a teenager. Got into all sorts of trouble. Had an incident down in Pauanui, and we went down there we started a street gang. It was like I always say to our police community that I work with, don't worry, I didn't make it onto your radar. We weren't that successful. But I remember pulling a gun on a young fella at an incident that happened. And this is where it all started for me, because I'd watched Boys in the Hood, and I thought that was the cool thing to do. You had to have a gun, you had to walk around, and you put it down your pants, right in the middle of your pants. And I was just like, a stupid place to put a gun. But anyway, I remember this particular moment, and I saw what fear looked like as I pulled the gun on this young fella. And he started begging me not to do it. And I remember in that moment, because this wasn't who I was. I was not this. I'm gentle. Got a big heart. I've got a beautiful soul. But I used to hear my grandfather always say, "Never let the Clarkson name down." And so I became something I wasn't, in order to try and fit in to my whānau, to my wider whānau, or for my grandfather really. And then I came back to Tāmaki after that incident, and it really rocked me. And I remember sitting in just not far from where I am now. It's just across the way. And I remember sitting there, and I'd been drinking my dad's home brew, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta go back to church," because we were raised Catholic, and I thought that's the only way to, for me to get better, because that's where good people were. And so I went back. I rang a friend and said, "You need to take me back," because I realized in myself, I said, if I carry on down this path, I'm going to be dead or in prison. And I went back to church drunk, went to communion, did all that stuff, and then I just started pursuing this, I guess, greater good. And that's where it started for me. As a 16-year-old teenager, I decided that I was going to give my life to community, and that's where it all began. And so I just started working. And so the first place was obviously in the church youth group, and I started working with youth. And so most of my early days were done in youth work, traveling not only up in here in Tāmaki, but we moved to the Wairarapa. In 1999, we set up a youth centre down in Kārarin, and in an old dairy factory. But all that time I was in a new relationship. I was married at 20, met this girl, and we were away. with life. And then all of a sudden, stuff started happening in that relationship. And I realized quite quickly that, again, it was that thing of going, this isn't okay, but what do I do? Because I'm a man. And I was raised by an uncle who said to me, never touch a woman, never lay your hands on a woman. And I remember when stuff would happen to me, just to I just used to be smart or giggle or whatever, just to try and, numb that, because I knew I wasn't allowed, it wasn't my right to hit anybody or touch another wahine. So I never did. And that was part of my value system. So that all kind of happened, and then and it just continued to get worse and worse. But it was when we moved out of Tāmaki and we moved down to the Wairarapa, where I felt quite isolated from. I had no whānau down there, and that's when I started my relationship with the bottle. And the bottle was the medicine that I used to numb my pain. And I talk about it with a level of shame, because I used to just drive around the streets, park up in a park, and I'd drink by myself, and then I'd just drive home, and I had no care for anything else in the world, because I was just focused on my own pain and the journey that I was going through at the time. Again, not feeling like I could tell anybody, because we were raised in a society where men were always told, "Oh, just drink some cement, bro, harden up, smack the bitch back," excuse my language, but that was the kōrero that we would hear. And who would you go and tell? Because they would just laugh at you, mock you, or whatever. And so I never did that. I just kept it to myself and kept shoving that down. We came back to Auckland in 2004 because I was going to become a pastor. I did become a pastor. I studied at Bible college for 3 years, and then became a pastor of a church for 8 years. But through that time, we moved into a place called Maryvale, which is a centre for women and children, while I was studying. It's based in Māngere, and the CEO of the time was from IOSIS, Ruby Duncan. She said to me, "How about you guys come and live here in the unit, and you can be a healthy model to the wahine in that space of what a healthy relationship could look like." So we went, and that was all good. We got accommodation and all that, and I just came on at night time at 9 o'clock, and I'd lock up everyone, lock up the gates, not lock up everyone, but lock up the gates, and the wahine or the babies would be down, and they'd just be having a smoke, having a coffee or Milo and stuff. And then one night they walked through, as I walked through, they said, "Bro, can you sit down?" And I sat down, and they said, "Oh, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, no, I'm all good." And they said, "We can hear what's going on, bro." And I just said, "Oh, look." I said, no, I'm all good." They said, no, bro, do you want us to sort it out? I said, no, you can't do that. But because they understood, because they were wahine that had been affected by tāne that had abused them in different ways. And so they knew that world. And it was the first time in my whole life where someone had seen me and heard me. But I didn't know what to do with it. I was on the board of a women's refuge in Māngere as well. And so I was just like, oh, well, same, just shove it down, carry on. And so I carried on doing the mahi. Then I went and served in the church. But things just progressively got worse. And the violence became more intense and more physical from my partner and at the time. And to the point that it became, there was strangulation, there was all sorts of stuff. And it just, and all the time I'm serving community. Every Sunday I got to get up and give a message of hope to a community. That's what I wanted to do. I chose to give my life to serve community, and I've done that ever since when I was 16 years old. And so I remember there was a particular night that things got really bad, and it was just bizarre because a lot of the times that things would happen, I'd still to this day find it difficult to recollect how it all happened. But I remember a particular night where, yeah, it was an awful experience. Pretty chilled night. I put both of my daughters, fed them, put them to bed, and I was playing darts in my garage with my neighbor who had a little barber shop. And so we said, oh, let's play some darts later once he closed the shop. And we lived in a cul-de-sac, and she was out at a meeting, came home. The garage door was up as she came through the garage, and she gave me a kiss, said hey, and said hi to the bro, and then went inside. Said, I'm just going to have a bath and go to bed. I said, get the boy. And then we finished our game, had our couple of beers, and then then my bro went home. And so I just lay down on the couch. And I was just listening to my sounds and finishing off my beer. And then I heard her coming through the garage, and she went to the fridge, and I just thought, oh, she's grabbing something from the fridge. But what she grabbed was a full bottle of champagne and a half a bottle of wine, and then just walked over to the side of the couch and behind me and just smashed it over my head, all over my face. And in that moment, like, I jumped up and I was just like, what the F? And I grabbed the key from my garage, grabbed my push bike, and just jumped on my bike and took off through Mangere. Cool thing about Mangere, there's heaps of little alleyways everywhere. So I knew where I was going, and then I ended up behind the Pack and Save, in the Pack and Save car park in Mangere, spitting blood everywhere, and I hopped in the harakeke bushes. And the reason I say the harakeke bushes, because that's exactly where the first place that I was abused was, in the harakeke bushes in the back of my house from that male. And I remembered what it felt like to be there. There was a level of safety, but there was also this level of something that had happened. And as I lay there waiting for the abusive texts to stop, because that was the other layer that came with that, I remember just hearing, not hearing, but I remember straight across the road from the Pack and Save car park is the Mangere police station. And not once did I even think to go into that space. So that was kind of the journey. And then I took a bit of a journey to get me out of that. Unfortunately, my father-in-law passed away not long after that, after I decided I was going to leave. I had my two daughters at the time. They were 5 and 7. This was in 2011. And then in 2012, Easter, I just done the Easter service up the Maunga in Mangere. And on Easter Monday, I took my daughters out. And we had this little tradition on the weekends. We would just, I'd just pick them up. We'd go out, we'd just grab them. I'd grab them a little packet of chips, a little tropical drink, and a chubba chub. And we drove up the different maunga in Tāmaki, and I'd talk to them about them in different places. And we'd just cruise around. And this particular day, I did that, and then I brought them home, and I set them up on their little couches. Gave them huge hugs, told them how much I loved and adored them, and put on a program for them. And then I went out into the garage and put a bike tube around my neck and stepped off my workbench. And because I couldn't take it anymore. And, I remember all I heard in that moment was, your daughters need their father in their life. And so I managed to get myself free and reach out to the counsellor that I knew from the Maryvale, the Women's Centre, who's still my counsellor today, who I was talking to you earlier about with the crisis. There's one of our whānau, she's still an amazing wahine, and she was the first person who said to me, if you don't leave, she's going to kill you. I reached out to her, and then we formulated a plan so I could get out in July 22nd, 2012. Hardest day of my life, knowing that my babies were going to come back from Kura and Papa wasn't going to be there. People say to me often, why did you go? Because society says that to us all the time, and all of our system that we work in always says that our babies are best with their mamas. And so that's all I just accepted that bull crap. as far as I'm concerned. Sorry, don't mean to offend anyone, but it was, I understand now that that's not true, because some of our men are the better parents to be with our babies in those situations. And so I continued. I went through a bit of a dark time after that, about 6 months of dark times, and then I went back into the youth space. The church had stood me down. They didn't think that a separated man should be a minister anymore. So I kind of turned my back on all of that, and I still have my faith. I still believe that, in a higher power and stuff, but and that was just my journey. And so I just continued to give my life to community. And but as I was working, in the marae at Ngā Whare Wātea in Māngere also, which was funny, going back working in Māngere, or everywhere I was working was in Māngere, where all the stuff had happened. And we were working in the iwi community panels, Te Paioranga. And so I love that space, because it's an opportunity for our whānau to sit around a space that's not court, and actually we can hear the story of what's going on for our whānau, and then through that process we can actually formulate better plans for our whānau, so that healing can take place for our whānau. So anyway, I worked in that space, and I'm still working in that space off and on now. But through all that time working with whānau, often we would have men come through and there was nowhere for them to go. And there were some places for men to go on their own in Pāmaki. There's some good places for our tāne to go for, just for themselves, but not much for them and their babies to go. And so I just had this kind of dream and vision that I needed to start something. And so one day I just said to my wife, I'm remarried, not that one, the new one. That's the love story part. We don't need to go into the story part. But that was a good healing part that came a couple of years after me leaving. And then she was a real advocate for me, my wife, and just said, I'm just going to make sure that I protect you, because you've got such a big heart with huge capacity. I don't want you to burn out, and we need you around for our whānau too. And so she's been a real protector of that. But I said to her one day, we were driving down the road, which I'm looking out the window, you can't see it, but just out there, and I pulled up waiting at the lights, and I saw this property for sale, and I just said, hey, I'm keen to buy this property. And she goes, with what? I said, I don't know. I just want to buy it because I'm a big visionary man. And so I said, because I saw it visually, I could see it. The front whare, the one that we're sitting in now, this is the place where we run our programs out of. There's a room next door, which is a counselling room, and through there is where all our office spaces. And then the back 2 units down the driveway is for our men's refuge. Anyway, this was the Friday, and the auction. I went open home was Saturday, so I went along to the open home on Saturday. And then they said, the auction's Monday. And I went, heck, I got nothing together. And I went, well, I'm just going to go to the auction anyway. So on the way to the auction, I rang our mortgage broker and I said, bro, just a quick part-time. Can you give me a rough figure of what I could borrow on our house if we were to, I've just seen something that I'd be keen on. And he goes, have you got what income? I said, never mind the income part. Let's just give me a figure. So he gave me a figure, and I went to the auction, and I wasn't registered in the auction. I've never done this before, bro. I just rocked up with a big heart and a big vision, and turned up. And so they went to auction, and I sat there with the lady that I met at the house, and didn't sell. And she comes to me and she goes, bro, now it's your time to shine. Yep. And I'm like, real? And she's like, yeah, you need to put an offer in if you want. And I'm like, let's go. So I just put an offer in, and all I knew was subject to finance. Yeah. So I chucked it in, and then they took them all away to all the people that put in offers, and then she walks back out of the room, and she says, the tenant wants to work with you. And everyone else walked out the door, and I was like, oh shucks, this is getting real now. And so we sat down and we started negotiating, and then it went unconditional, and I was like, oh heck, and then my wife was like, so how are you going to pay for this? I was like, I don't know about that. Don't worry about
that out on the way.
I'll figure it out. And so she goes, hey, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I was going to start a charitable trust. And so one started. And so, I mean, I'd been talking about, this has been bubbling. It sounds really like it. I mean, it'd been bubbling in my head.
Yeah.
And so this is how we arrive at Wonder, bro. And so, and then the process started. I had to figure out what to do because I had no idea. I'd never done this before. I'd worked for organizations all over the Motu, and everyone had everything all done.
Yeah.
And now I've got to do everything and figure it out. So master of, what is it? Master of all trades. Master of none. But anyway,
master of none.
Yep. That's the one, bro. So that was me. And so we just had to figure it out on the fly, and I did. And I just pulled around. I just reached out to people that I had really supported me on the journey. Amazing people around the community, working in community. My accountant, our treasurer of our board, was my youth group leader at 15 years old, bro. So he's on board, and one of my old bosses at the prison, she's now the Māori CEO at Auckland City Mission, and another lady, she is another friend, and she'd been at Kids Can for 8 years, and so they all came around, and I've got a really good friend of ours. She was the first, really. She had her own company on the side, but she just came in and did all the admin for me, and just because honestly, as you probably know, those that have reached out to me, it's better to call me than email me.
Yeah,
because I'll quickly pick up the phone rather than email. But and so that's it. And so this a really good friend of mine, she's been our admin support, volunteered the whole time before we were Wana, and to this day, and so other people have kind of come on board just to help me out. And an old friend of mine that I was a youth worker with, and I was a lawyer, so he did our trust deed for us, and I just pulled on the resources, bro. Yeah. Like I didn't know what to do. I said, hey, I need to do this, and then the old the Women's Refuge that I was on the board of, they sent us through all their policies and procedures, and we updated those to make them more relevant because those are from the ARC. But it's just been a real sense of community, a real sense of hustle, and let's figure it out as we go. But I was committed to do it because I believe in the kaupapa, because my mentor always said to me, by telling the story gives permission for others to tell theirs. And so as I started to tell my story, more men would come forward and say, this is my story. I'm going through this too, bro. And so that's why I go around the Motu and tell my story. And I've been working alongside an amazing team in the police. I got invited on with Jude and Jeremy to tell my story when we do our police training. And I've had police officers come up to me in the break and say, bro, I'm going through it too. I don't know how to get out. And so family violence doesn't discriminate. Sexual violence doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter who you are, where you fit in society. It can affect anyone. And so I knew that there was going to be a need. But unfortunately, everyone that we've applied for funding for, they still don't believe it. It's a thing. They think, it's male assault, female when you think family violence, which, the stats point to that. However, we're doing some research with Canterbury Uni to bring our own stats together so I can give the finger to those that diss us all the time. Nah, sorry. I shouldn't say that.
If we were to target in on, there was something that I really, really wanted to talk to you about. So you mentioned all of these resources that you've pulled on and to kind of get the groundswell for the creation of Wana. How did you build those relationships? What were some of the key things that you did with people? Was it time spent? Was it mahi that you've done with other people? What was kind of the secret sauce of Dean Clarkson that keep these relationships in play for you?
I think for me, it was wairua ki te wairua, aroha ki te aroha. Like, the people have the same nākau, that the people have the same wairua, like do we align? And those relationships that are aligned, like, I have a real huge heart for tauwhi, right? Because straight away when I met Tim, when I was back doing stuff with the parenting place and we were building also matua that tauwhi ran, I connected with Tim. And it was actually the Tauwhi Men's Centre when I came down there and I went, oh my gosh, this is what I want. But, you know, in a smaller town in Aotearoa, community, because I lived in the Wairarapa, so community is done a lot different than like Tāmaki Makaurau. You can't do that, so we have to do it differently up here. And so, but I knew that there needed to be a space for men to just pop in and be here, and we can have a place for our men. And so that was really where my inspiration come from. But all the relationships, they aligned wairua ki te wairua. Yeah, and if people had the same nākaus, kind of same values, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of where it connected for me. And I've got people on here that I just, Kane, my brother Kane, just sitting there, you know. I only met Kane, I've only met him like a few times, but the first time I met him and his beautiful wife, straight away I connected straight with the mahi that they were doing. And so there's people like that, and like as soon as I connect, like that's it for life for me. Like, you know, I've got you, you know, and yeah, and that's kind of the way it's gone. I think I'm highly relational. People go, oh, can you put it into a program or put it into a nah? No, you can't put fluid into that. Hey, like some people like it like that, and I'm like, no, that's not how I roll. And I've stayed true to who I am. And I know some people don't like it, but this is just the way that that's what works for me. And I'm not saying it works for everybody, but I know that because you know what, and it comes back to that puku reader that I developed as a young boy. I knew pretty quickly if you're a dick or not. You know, sorry, like straight away I can sense that, you know, like I'm like, oh, I won't. Yeah, no, I'll be polite and I'll be, you know, I'll share aroha, manaki and all that. But I know that that's as far as it'll go in those spaces. But there's some people where I connect with and it'll go deep real quick. And that's the way that I've always done life. And that's why those relationships that have developed like 15 years when I was a 15-year-old. Hello, I'm 51 now. You know, he's, you know, still in my world. And yeah, so those things are really important to me. I
just wanted to mention this comment, like Tim Marshall, ngā mihi brother, aroha mai can't get my camera to work. So he is here, and he wants to see you, and he wants to be seen by you. He just can't figure out his camera. So it's not to cut off recorded or anything, but yeah, Tim's here. He's the
home for me, bro.
And we are very grateful for having people like Tim. One of the beauties of having Tim be a part of this kaupapa is that it gives us a broader spread of people to kind of tap into, to kind of share with the network, which is kind of the function of our webinar today, is because of people like Tim who've been in this mahi, who've been at every kind of spot within the mahi. And so like I wanted really to talk to you about like governance. So you're the founder and CEO of Wana. How has governance kind of contributed to your growth as a person moving away from maybe the frontline part of you? What have you had to learn? What are the skills that you've had to pick up on the governance end? You mentioned having processes and policies and all that kind of stuff. So what have you had to learn to level yourself up to contribute to the wider idea of Wana?
Well, it's like learning a whole nother language.
Yeah, well,
I'm looking at some of that stuff going, what the heck is that? Have you got, and people, I was very fortunate again because of connection through Women's Refuge. Actually, some of the peeps down in the head office connected with me, and they came here. I was speaking over at Hestia Women's Refuge over in Orewa, and two of the top people, or one lady I first met through the police training, and she had been there. And anyway, they came to Wana. They said, "Oh, we need to come. We need you operating, bro, because we get so many referrals for men. So let's help you." And they came and they sat with me. They said, "What do you need?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "Well, this is what you need," because I didn't know. Like they said, "You need this. Have you got this? Have you got?" I said, "No, I don't." And again, for me, it's just this baptism of fire, bro, having to learn what I needed. Even like people say, "Oh, being a preferred supplier, MSD." We've not had one. We've had one payment since we've been operating for our men's refuge. Everyone else, kind of order, MSD, all of them, they all say, "Oh, we'll sort it out." And then, "Are you a preferred supplier?" "What's a preferred supplier?" "Oh, you need to fill out this form." "Yeah, fill it out." "Oh, yeah, okay." And we filled it out, and then we still don't get paid. We're like, "Oh, come on." Anyway, so there's been these steep learning curves, and we've had to go through a process of, I didn't know any of that. Like, because all the places that I've worked for previous were already preferred suppliers. I've already had a contract. And so those are those moments for me where, they've been learnings, and, it's cost us along the way. And, because we don't have a contract, we've just recently got some funding just end of last year from a trust, kind of just to pay for my salary, because since we'd been open, I hadn't been taking anything I earned around the mutu, because put back and keep the lights on, and so all of those things I needed to, we tried to reach out for different funding and get declined because people, again, they don't believe it, and we're new. So you just got to keep, it's disheartening. I remember one particular, for me, because the mahi's still got to get done, and there's only me. Like when I say we, we is me. Was just like, upside down, bro. And so I'm lucky I've got, our admin lady who does all our admin for me, she, volunteering, but everything else with our, we've had some other volunteers come in and do some program stuff now and again, but in terms of, we've got to do the CEO type stuff, and then you still got to do the frontline stuff with our whānau, and that's been a challenge. And I remember the board keeps saying to me, "Bro, if we don't, we're going to have a serious conversation next board meeting, whether we close the doors or not." And I'm just like, ain't closing. Like, I don't know what I'll have to do. Jokingly, my wife said, "Oh, you better set up OnlyFans." No, jokes. I said, "I won't make anything off that, bro." Anyway, just that's the reality, because it was like we're not getting contracts. I remember getting declined by a trust, and I don't mean to mock anyone. I'm just telling the reality. We applied for a small amount of funding and got declined for it for our men's refuge, and yet Pet Refuge got $250,000. And I love my pets, but I'm talking about men and their babies. But again, because society doesn't believe it's a thing. It's I'm up against it, and kete pai, and I'll keep fighting. I ain't gonna stop, man. We just keep on keeping on, and but it's the learnings, and I've just got to continue to stay humble, and I keep fighting, keep opening. I don't feel like I feel like doors open for us. But I come back to being at Tawawhi, and I know that at the Tawawhi, they've got the they've got the timeline of all the things that have happened and how many years they've been operating. And I've only been going nearly 2 years in July, and and I'm looking at that as the ultimate. It'll be amazing. Staff, I want to have staff around me. I want to have and be able to have a bigger reach. And it's really hard to turn down a whānau for our whare. I know Ed would reach out to me recently, and for someone to go into our whare, and our whare's been full. We keep I'm turning people away because we can't. we can't house enough men because the referrals keep coming. And the thing that I'm noticing is there's so many self-referrals coming through now through our website. Yeah, so there's lots of learnings, bro, but I can't pinpoint. I've just had to roll with it and figure it out as I go.
That seems like a really powerful thing. Yeah. Like there is one part of this corridor that sounds like I did have this idea, like a tahuhu, like this thing that just existed in my mind, that just as a roof for my whare. And then as you're walking through it, you're just being like, oh, cool. And just rolling with things as they're happening. And that seems really, really powerful. On the kind of the flip side of that kind of whakaaro. So if we were to take a step out of wana and look just at the wider community, what kind of conditions do communities need to create if we want people to seek support before things get to wana or get to the polls or get to the 5F reports and all that? So what are the conditions that would need to happen in Mangere? What is one condition that would contribute to a male or a whānau seeking help before it gets to crisis?
I think for me, bro, is to ask better questions.
Yeah.
I think, and that's the thing that I learned through, being in Te Paeoranga. There's always, everyone talks about the iceberg and they always talk about anger, what sits below the surface, but it's the same with our whānau. You turn up to an incident, look behind the behavior, ask the question, what's going on in your world right now? Why, what's been happening, because there's a number of factors, and we all know this working in this space in community. There are so many factors going on for our whānau, and often when we see the worst part of, when the police turn up or we get a referral, it's at the extreme end.
Yeah.
And we don't get to, so before we make a judgment, I'm very big on just keep a blank canvas. I never ask to see the reports, and I know, and people will probably say this is unsafe practice, but I go, no, it's not, because by sometimes we read the reports and then we've already made a judgment before we go into that corridor. And I've still got my own strategies to keep me safe. I don't need your system to tell me how I need to keep myself safe. I do that myself. So, but it's the same when I worked in the prison. When the men would come onto our program to do Building o Matua, the parenting program, I never asked them to, I never wanted to know what they'd done. I never wanted, they were already screened before I got to meet with our men. And so it didn't matter to me, because all I saw was a fellow human that needed some tautoko and some aroha. And so that's always my starting point. And so for me, it's the ask better questions, look behind the behavior, don't be quick to judge, and be willing to believe the kōrero, because I remember just recently talking with some of our police staff. One of the things that is happening at the moment when they're turning up to these family harm incidents is that the first, and as a male victim, they will turn up and they say, what did you do to provoke him? Again, trying to push the blame onto the male for starting the violence in the first place. And so, like straight away as the man, like I know a guy, and this is a horrific story, who he rung the police himself. He's now got a bracelet on because when they turned up, she had smashed up the house and said, look what he's done. And he said, why are you taking me away? I called you. Listen to the call. And soon as she smashed the phone out of his hand, she said to him, you wait till they get here, you'll see. And now he has a bracelet and he can't do anything until he fights this battle. And so, like, it's really difficult. Like, it's a fine line, and people that turn up in these situations, and I'm talking more around our police staff, frontline, they get it at the hot end.
Yeah.
We get it a couple of days later, right? Generally. So we have time to be able to kōrero. But if our tāne have been treated badly,
yeah,
they're already hoha.
Yeah.
They don't want to,
you know. It's harder for us that are going into the after the fact. Yeah.
Aye. And so I think for me, it's just, just step back, take a breath, don't judge, and listen. You know, and start there and actually listen to the kōrero and trust your gut too. You know, ask those questions and call them out if you think they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. I call them out. I don't have a problem. I said, don't crap me, bro. I know what you're talking about. Like, don't lie. You know, and sorry, bro. I'll boss. Like, no, just tell it to me straight. Because I'm willing to meet you halfway, but you need to be straight up with me too. And I try and I just very clear when we work with our tāne. And and I want to say this because if there's if wahine are listening to this kōrero too, I don't want them to feel like this is anti-wahine, as well. Like it's because I tautoko all of the work that our wahine are doing for our wahine and our tāne that are doing for our wahine as well. So this is not a tit for tat, but when we talk family violence, family is family. Yeah, it's not male, it's not female, not children, it's the whole whānau. And so I don't want to get into the tit for tat. It's not us against them. I stand on the same page as same line as our wahine too, and what's happening to them is not okay in our communities either. So I just want that to be really clear. Even though our mahi is centered around tāne.
That kind of brings us to our next pātai. And just as a reminder, whānau, if you have any pātai, leave it in the chat so that I'll ask them to Dean. But this is a pātai from Kane. Have you developed any strategies for dealing with people who drop into binary mindsets, like men's refuge versus women's refuge? Affirming violence against men undermines movements against violence against women. How can we have an and mindset where one is a direct affirmation and support for the wider non-violence kaupapa? So how do we stop people from going, well, if you support men's refuge, you're going against women's refuge, that kind of whakaaro? How have you dealt with that kind?
Oh, to be honest, bro, I remember learning this from my wife who was in media, and so she used to get a lot of abuse as a Māori wahine on the screens and having a kauai and all that, and the comments and the stuff that used to come to her. And she never used to read the comments. And so for me, I don't listen to that noise. At the end of the day, I work with our partners. I get referrals from our women's refuge. I've got really good relationships with our women's refuge. I've got good relationship with Shine. All of our services that are working for our whānau, that's all I focus on. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones that are there for one another. And so when people start running their mouth or whatever, for me, that's my own strategy. That's the way that I roll with it. I don't buy into it. I'm like, yeah, I hear you. However, we're not just for men. Yeah. Because I do stuff with our wahine too. And it's the same because I do stuff at City Mission with their wahine too. And so I'm not anti-wahine. And just because we have a tāne refuge. I think one of the challenges which I've actually, which has been a huge challenge, I think, come to me, which I've been navigating, and I haven't landed on answers to this, but this is something was out from our Rainbow family. I've had a lot of referrals from the Rainbow community, but I've also had people who have identified, as tāne or wahine, and then what do we do in terms of our refuge space, and what does that look like? And so those are the questions, some more difficult questions that I've had to wrestle with in my head. And so we haven't landed on all of that yet, but that's a conversation that I just wanted to table, because that has been a reality, because I never want to turn anybody away that comes through the doors or reaches out to us. And that's been a real challenge. So I don't know if that really answered your question, Kane, but that's kind of that's just kind of the way that I approach it.
Just
my
blinders, got the horse
Yeah.
blinders on, just upoko pakaru towards your whakaaro.
kind of the partners are the important thing, you know, because it's we need each other. We need to do this mahi together. And so I will always tautoko our Women's Refuge, and they're the same for us. And so those relationships are really important. And so, yeah, that's just kind of the way that I kind of do it. I just kind of block out the noise. I just like, one of the things my mate Jude always says is that she calls it, you know, when people talk about stuff like that, they go, it's unconscious ignorance.
Yeah.
People will say stuff, but they don't actually know what, you know, they haven't thought through what they're trying to say. They just throw out something. And anyway, that's just a little whakaaro.
Well, because that seems like it's a symptom of the world that we are currently living in, where social media is a really big thing. People have platforms from which to speak on any given topic at any given day. Have you put any thought into what your platform has become? I recently saw that you were on Unfiltered with the Brown Butterbean, Dave Letele, and the awesome mahi that he's doing up there in South Auckland. How has that kind of changed your perception of social media? Because like we've seen the podcast, we've seen the kōrero that's come out of it. Has that changed how conversations have happened in your immediate kind of atmosphere, or like around you, the kōrero that's happening?
No, if anything, it's just increased my referrals, which is, I mean, it's amazing. But
it's great.
But I had one from Levin the other day. I had one from Wellington. I've had one from Whangarei. So I'm getting them from across the mutu as well. And which is, it's great that people are reaching out. I mean, in terms of a platform, I don't really have a platform, bro. You know, like I'd love a platform, but I don't have a social media manager over here. I just throw out what we can. That's probably as good as it gets, bro. I don't have the putia to.
Yeah,
I'm just too busy doing that. People say, "Oh, bro, you need to put more stuff on." Oh, bro, I'd love to, but
I got stuff to do. Gee,
I'd like to sleep too, bro. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah.
Realistically, that's what the function of the Changemakers network is to be. Like, I know that there are some very amazing social media people within the network, the wider network that we're trying to create here. And it's not to say that this would be something that they would volunteer their time and all that kind of stuff, but like at least we can start a conversation. Because at the very core of us, what we want here in Suranga is for people in those rohe to help other people in those rohe do stuff that they're really passionate about. And because, like you mentioned, the platform would be great to have, because then you could leverage that into maybe some, I don't know, money, maybe some funding, maybe some this or that. And
that'd be
so
great.
I guess what I want to ask, like, and what I really want to ask is, what does Wana look like in a year's time, in 5 years' time? And in your most aspirational, with your most aspirational glasses on, G, what does Wana look like?
To be honest, bro, that we will have a whare across the mutu. We will be Men's Refuge Aotearoa. Because everywhere I travel around the mutu, we have people asking, can we start one here? How do we McDonaldize Wana to have something in the community? And I always just say, I would love to. I didn't win the 28 million, but it would be great to be able to do that. That's my aspiration, that we would have spaces around the mutu where our men and their babies can go safely. And that we would be able to partner with organizations across the motu who are already in community, and there's whare. And I'm in a conversation because I'm doing some mahi in Kirikiriroa, and they're looking at purchasing a property, and they said, "Oh, would you have be open to it being a Wana whare?" And I said, "Absolutely." They said, "We'll fund it, we'll resource it, but you guys run it through Wana." And I'm like, that would be the ultimate. like absolutely. And obviously I'm paid and then I have staff on board, you know, like, bro, like actually, but we'll get there. I know we'll get there. And I'm only early days, you know, it's infant, you know, we've got to crawl before you can walk, and I just got to stay faithful and keep on keeping on.
Yeah, bro. So just 2 more comments from the comment section. Kane had to go. Ngā mihi nui mō kōrero, ko tākoha mai kia mātou. Thank you for the kōrero that you're gifted to us. And again, like just to reaffirm that, it's always been amazing to listen to your kōrero, but the way that you present it is something, and like, because I vibrate and I feel with people, I love meeting people who vibrate in that way. So yeah, te rata mihi o Kane. Brian Gardner down there in Pōneke. Tēnā rawa.
Kia ora, Brian.
Kia ora, Dean. Thanks for sharing your kōrero. A great insight into something that we need to talk about more. Disrupt some myths and create safety for all, and ask better questions. And because asking better questions, I think we underestimate how simple and also how hard that is simultaneously. And it does take some practice to ask better questions. And it also takes some practice to go into situations with clear eyes, being open to any kind of possibility. And one more from Stephen Evans all the way down in Otu Matua in Otautahi. Kia ora, Dean. Thank you for your sharing. He has to go because he's the tumuaki of a residential college in Otautahi.
Okay, don't worry, Brian, your t-shirt's still coming, bro.
He's been asking since Tāmaki Makaurau Wānanga, bro. I'm like, don't ask Dean. Although, tēnā rā tātou, I think we'll call it there. It's 1 minute to 12. Nei rā te mihi atu kia tātou. Gee, wow. Jamie McCaskill, kia ora tātou. Thank you for the kōrero, Dean. Awesome kōrero. From te whāriki mana wahine o hauraki no te tara o te ika māo. So down there in Kapiti, down in Pōneke, down in Whanganui Ātara. Jamie McCaskill. Tēnā koe, brother. I want to close us off with a karakia. Tēnei te mea te kia koe, Dean. Mō kōrero, mō tākoha, for everything that you bring to the table, brother, but mostly for how you've just upoko pakaru wana, and you've just created this thing just purely on will. As you said, you didn't know much, but I'm just going to go, walk, keep going forward. Nei rā te mihi atu kia koe te brother. Yeah, kei noi tātou. E te atua, whakatuwhera te mai kia mātou ngā huarahi o te tika, te ora, te pono, te kaha, me te māramatanga. Mā mātou koe whakamuimiti e whakakrōria ki tō ingoa tatu. Āmine. Tēnā tātou. Ka kite.